The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gam Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. They're coming to customers, pledge $5, get $100 once funds, means promo code SGPN. And welcome, everyone, to the Tennis Gam Podcast here on the Sports Gam Podcast Network. And it's currently Thursday night, October 30th, around 11 p.m. Eastern. I'm Rosso Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the quarterfinals taking place in Paris. We're going to break down the matchups for Friday, all four of them in a few minutes. Before we get to that, though, a brief reminder. Support the show by like, subscribe on YouTube. Reminder, let's leave a rating and review on Spotify or Apple. Podcasts you can find on YouTube or, once again, multiple audio-only platforms. It's fine either way. Leave a rating and a review to help the show grow on those platforms. And leave a like, subscribe to the channel to help the channel grow. Plus, a reminder to check the merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great tennis merch. We have sweatshirts, we have t-shirts, we have mugs, a lot of high-quality content, very cheap, and I do think you'll like the selection we have. So check out the merch store for merchandise, not just for this show, for the other shows with the network. Plus, a reminder, you can also check out all the different podcasts that we have on SGPN. The NFL, MLB, NBA, college football, and the NHL are all live. We've got podcasts giving out free picks on everything. Subscribe to the SGPN feed to catch every episode wherever you do get your podcast. So, starting off with the recap of the lock and dog for the last episode. Overall, decent, not great. For the lock, not even close. We had Leheshka team total over 12.5 at -142. Vacherot buried him. Really never even a sweat for him. Leheshka got destroyed early and often, and that was just a bad read. We thought that Vacherot would, I'd say, look a little bit worse than he did against everybody else in Shanghai, and he did not. He looked very good. Leheshka came out flat, got buried, and Vacherot went God mode as Leheshka got buried in straight sets, so picked up a loss there. Good news, though, had a nice win with Fonseca -1.5 games at even money against Chapo. Beat Chapo again for the second time in a week. Same exact story. Chapo won the first set, then eventually did lose in 3. Fonseca got the job done, and he also covered the spread. So nice win there for the dog. Once again, not a great episode, but not a horrible episode either, as we ended up splitting the lock and dog pick. So looking at the recap of what happened on Thursday in the round of 16. First things first, Dimitrov came back briefly, beat Perricard, then no-showed his match against Medvedev. So either way, he won a match and decided, you know what, I don't want to go. So he ended up leaving, and either way, ended up once again winning a match and then quitting, giving Medvedev a free bye into the round of 16. Besides that, though, really no drama in the matchups on Thursday. You had two matches that went to 3 sets. One was close, one was not. So for starters, Vacherot keeps rolling, beat Norrie in straight sets. Nice win for him. Norrie with the shocking upset win against Alcaraz in the first match, and then immediately loses to Vacherot, which is very funny. But either way, Vacherot, nice win for him. Felix ended up dropping the first set to Altmaier, then he came back and he won in 3. One of the only 2 matchups that ended up going to 3 sets on Thursday. Wasn't close, won 6-2 in the final set. It's really never a chance for Altmaier once he did win that first set. Shelton beat Rublev, not really a surprise. He looked very good against Kaboli, and then he carried it over against Rublev. Nice win there in straight sets. Bublik keeps rolling, though. Ended up beating Mutet and had a very, I'd say, nice trash-talking message there after the match, and then afterwards he beat Fritz. So a nice combo there for Bublik. He looks fantastic, and we'll see if he can sneak into Turin as an alternate maybe. But either way, he looks really good. So we'll see how he looks for the remainder of the event. de Minaur ended up beating Khachanov. Khachanov ended the Fonseca win streak and then ended up losing to de Minaur comfortably, 6-2, 6-2. Medvedev had a war against Sonego, ended up losing the first set, came back and won in 3. That was the closer match, as that one was 6-4 in the final set. Sinner was up a break early in the first set, gave it back, but then eventually did win, and he coasted to the finish line as he beat Sorondolo 7-5, 6-1. And Zverev had an easy match after barely beating Ugo Carabelli in the first round in a 7-5 third set. Down a break in the third set, by the way. Not ideal, but he played Fokina. We know Fokina was off of the title run, or I should say the final run in Basel, lost to Fonseca, ended up beating Kaza, gave a little Steph Curry night-night celebration to the crowd, and then got killed by Zverev on Thursday as he only won 6 games. So once again, not too much drama. Overall, the event's been pretty, I'd say, controversial up to this point. A lot of people complaining about the court speeds. We knew it was going to be slower than normal. It is, according to most players on tour, the slowest court of the entire season. So you've seen a lot of rallies and I'd say not as many dominant serve performances that you would have expected. But either way, we have seen a lot of long rallies, a lot of fun points, but it has been really noticeable how slow the courts are compared to previous seasons, and that has frustrated certain players. I know Zverev, though, made his comments in Shanghai about how the ATP was trying to set up Sinner Alcaraz finals by making the court slower. Good luck with that. Alcaraz lost to Norrie in the first round. So, Zverev, you sound even dumber. But either way, point was a pretty, I'd say, underwhelming Thursday, and we'll see what ends up happening. Yeah, I see a Roots mentioned in the comment section that the surface is kind of like Indian Wells, which coincidentally Alcaraz has owned in his career. But for some reason, couldn't get it going against Norrie. And he had a bunch of unforced errors, and we saw Norrie win. So it seems like now it's Sinner's actual tournament to lose, obviously. Fitness-wise, he had the marathon run, or I should say marathon final against Zverev in Vienna, en route to the title there. We'll see if he holds up, but without Alcaraz, definitely his event to lose, and we'll see what happens there. But once again, really not too much drama. Only one competitive third set in the entire card on Thursday, and we'll see what happens on Friday. Either way, though, thinking if there's anything else worth talking about in terms of tennis news, I can't really think of anything, to be honest. Let me just see if there's anything else going on. No. Nothing else worth talking about. All right, anyway, so time to move on into the breakdown of the matchups taking place on Friday. Before we get into the breakdown of those matchups, a reminder they're brought to you by our sponsor, which is my book at ADG, using to bet on football, tennis, basketball, hockey, and name it. Also a prop builder, so you can use that for props. They also allow you to use crypto for funding your account, for getting nice payouts. And a reminder, when you my book at ADG, use code SGPN for 100% bet back bonus, $500 from customers. Look at the G promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Novig, which is the number one prediction market for sports in America. Getting great prices by shopping around at Novig. Download the app. When you do so, get $50 in bonus funds for free when you spend just $5 if you use a promo code SGPN. So you get an extra Novig, promo code SGPN, spend $5, get $50 in bonus funds with the code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of the Thursday matchups. Time to move on into the preview of the quarterfinals taking place in Paris on Friday. So, starting off with the first match on the card, going to be between Felix and Vacherat. So, for this one, Felix is a favorite, minus 165. Vacherat's around plus 133. For the over-under 23.5, juice towards the under, and for the spread, I see minus 1.5 for Felix with juice, and I see Vacherat plus 1.5 games at around even money. So for the head-to-head history, there is none. Vacherat, though, has been rolling top 40 in the worlds from out of nowhere. You might remember when they're qualifying, pulled off the miracle run in Shanghai, lost to Fritz in a marathon in Basel. Good showing there. Did lose in 3 and showed up in Paris and beat Lehechka in straight sets, beat his cousin again, Rinderknech in 3, and ended up beating Norrie in straight sets. So Vacherat looks really, really good. You might have assumed it was just a Cinderella run that was going to be a story that eventually was forgotten. It has not been. Vacherat has kept the momentum going, and he has been able to make it to the quarters in another 1,000 Masters event. So very impressive by him. He looks very good. It's not fluky. Even though said he lost to Rinderknech, he was actually ahead by a set point or two in the tiebreak, but eventually did lose and then got the job done in 3 anyway. As for Felix, he's been winning in very unimpressive fashion. A very weak path so far in the event. He's gotten by, but not in a convincing fashion. So a reminder, ended up winning in Brussels. He won the title. Showed up in Basel, ended up beating Diallo and Cilic. Then he retired after dropping the first set against Munar. Showed up here, beat Comasagna, clay specialist in 3, beat Muller, who's been kind of up and down this season in 3 as well, and beat Altmaier in 3. So Felix is winning, and I get that he's a good hardcore player in general. Has he been impressive? Not really. He's lost a set in 4 straight matches, so not exactly in dominant form, but a win's a win, and he's here into the quarterfinals. Now, I do think for the actual pricing, Felix does seem expensive at 165. I think Vacherat should be more alive. I'm not saying it should be a full pick'em, but I think Felix should be like minus 125, minus 130. 165 feels very disrespectful to Vacherat. I think Vacherat has actually been looking very sharp. I think he's looked like arguably a better player in the event compared to Felix. And the fact is, the Cinderella run kind of doesn't really exist anymore when he's won 12 of the last 13 matches. It's one thing if one player is able to just go on a run and then immediately falls apart right afterwards. But he's kept it going. He lost to Fritz in a marathon. He made it back into the quarters the next 1,000 event. Vacherat might just be really good. So I do think the odds feel expensive for Felix. I'm not interested, not to mention the fact he did retire in the last event he was in, and then he had to go to 3 straight 3-setters to start this matchup against clay guys. I'm not impressed by the form that Felix is in. I get winning is winning, but Altmaier, Mueller, and Comasanya, you drop a set to each of them. Not impressed. I'll go with Vacherat to get the job done in this one of the money line for what I think is decent plus money. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Bublik against de Minaur. de Minaur is minus 134. Bublik is plus 110. For the spread, minus 1.5 for de Minaur, plus 1.5 for Bublik. The over-under is at 23.5 games. Now, Bublik has been incredible lately. So for the actual form, Bublik is currently flawless. He's won all 6 sets here. de Minaur did drop a set to Diallo. Then he ended up beating Kashanov in straight sets. Head-to-head has been mostly de Minaur, but they faced off on clay in the French Open this past year, and Bublik did beat de Minaur in 5. So on hard court, de Minaur is undefeated against him. He is 2-0. But I am going to point out that de Minaur did beat Indian Wells last year, which is a pretty similar slow hard court. It was close early. First set was 7-5, then Bublik no-showed, and he ended up losing the second set 6-0. But I think we'd all agree Bublik's headspace is a lot sharper than it was last year. So I don't want to really toss it out entirely, but I want to point out that Bublik, with the new, I'd say, look towards his career, has just been a lot more dialed in. And I do think that Bublik's overall weapons can translate well to the courts here. de Minaur, though, we know, has a ton of speed and a ton of rally tolerance, which can result in a really annoying opponent for the slow hard courts here, because you have to hit so many shots just to win 1 point against the guy. However, Bublik, we know, has the variety. He does have the actual serve that you give him an edge over de Minaur. The question is, should de Minaur be a favorite here of 134? Feels expensive. I think that it should be close to a pick'em. If this was minus 110, I'd understand it. I think 134 is pretty expensive for me. I think de Minaur might end up winning, but I do think Bublik is disrespected here. And him beating Fritz pretty handily in the second set, and with him looking sharp against Moutet. Moutet's not the exact same as de Minaur, of course, but still variety, a lot of rally tolerance, and Bublik was able to pass that test with flying colors. I think Bublik looks good, and I think that the odds here feel a bit off to me. I think it should be closer to a pick'em, so I'll go for Bublik here. Might be close. I get it. Maybe it goes 3, but I do think I'll go Bublik for the value at around plus 110. Price feels pretty generous. I think de Minaur should be maybe minus 115 as a favor, but basically a pick'em. 134 feels expensive. Give me Bublik for this one as my choice. Moving on to the next one, Sinner against Shelton. Biggest favorite on the board. Sinner's minus 500. Shelton is plus 375 for the spread, minus 3.5 for Sinner. Pretty juiced there, minus 155. For Shelton, plus 3.5, plus 120. The over-under in games is set at 22.5. Under is minus 130. The over is plus 102. So Sinner, we know, fitness-wise, has not been at his best. But you know what? Winning is winning. He won in Vienna, showed up here, beat Bergs handily, and beat Cerundolo in straight sets. People were concerned about the fitness at the end of that Cerundolo match. He won the second set 6-1, so not really concerned too much. Shelton, though, does look good. I had questions about the actual fitness after losing to Munar in Basel. Should have lost to Majcik, but either way. Ended up beating Kaboli in straight sets and beat Rublev in straight sets. So we know Shelton's serve can be very dangerous. We know Sinner's also owned him in the head-to-head. Sinner so far in his career is undefeated against Shelton since the original loss in Shanghai in the first ever meeting. Shelton did beat him in 2023. Since then, Sinner has won every match against him without dropping a set. So Sinner has won 6 straight against Shelton without dropping a set. So the question is, does that script change, or does Sinner win once again in straight sets? Now, once again, minus 500. It's expensive. I get it. Sinner in straight sets, though, is around minus 150. So the real question is if Sinner is going to just keep rolling against his opponent, and if he ends up winning in straight sets once again. So for the actual matchup, I probably will go Sinner in straight sets. Maybe get a breaker in there. I know the over 12.5 games for a team total is around minus 150. I get that for Sinner, but I think Sinner's the better player, obviously. I understand that Shelton's looked good so far against Kaboli and against Rublev. Both guys kind of similar. They have firepower, but not mentally tough enough to handle adversity. And we saw Shelton take them into deep waters and eventually find a way to outlast them to win in straight sets both times. Sinner has the firepower and the actual mental toughness, and I just think eventually he'll wear Shelton down. Shelton's serve has been very good so far in the event. Rublev did not break him, for example, in the entire match that happened in the round of 16. In fact, no breakpoints for Rublev. Then again, Rublev, we know, is a pretty abysmal returner for a guy that's around the top 15. Kaboli broke him. Kaboli did not break. Kaboli had one break point, did not convert. So Shelton has not actually been broken the entire event, but we know Sinner is an elite returner, and we know that Sinner, with the actual slow-paced courts, I think should go well for the I'd say matchup here for Sinner. So I think Sinner ends up winning in straight sets, maybe get a breaker in there, but I do think Sinner answered a lot of fitness questions in the second set when he won 6-1. So I'm going to go with Sinner in straight sets minus 155. If you want to go Shelton, I can understand your angle. But until he wins a set, it's 6 straight, once again, 2-0 or 3-0s that Sinner's had against Shelton. I'll back history there. Shelton hasn't won a set against him since 2023. I think Sinner wins, maybe a breaker, but I'll go from there. Give me Sinner straight sets minus 155 as my main thought for this one. Moving on to the final matchup in the quarters. You have Medvedev against Zverev, the most even matchup on the board. For this one, basically minus 110 on both sides. For the actual over-under here, I do see it available at around 24.5. So decent amount on the total, but you can understand it with the history. Now, for the history, Medvedev, we know, has been really just Zverev's father for the last couple of years. For the actual head-to-head, though, before I get into that, though, a brief discussion of the path so far. Medvedev played 2 matches, ended up beating Munar in straight sets. Good win. Munar was in good form, and he beat him handily. Then he ended up beating Dimitrov, and he ended up beating Sonego in 3. For Zverev, Ugo Carabelli was a 3-setter, and Zverev was at 2-0 as he ended up beating Fokina. So Zverev had a war against Carabelli after the marathon loss against Sinner in Vienna, and now he's back to facing off against his father because Medvedev has won 5 straight, and Medvedev has won 9 in a row, or I should say 9 of the last 10. He's 5 in a row, 9 of the last 10. Faced off 2 times this year in Beijing and in Halle, and Medvedev did win in straight sets in Beijing and won in 3 in Zverev's backyard, actually, in Halle, as he ended up winning in 3. So the last time Zverev actually beat Medvedev was in Cincinnati 2023, and before that, Medvedev won 4 in a row. So once again, 9-1 run for Medvedev in the head-to-head against Zverev. So for the actual pricing, am I going to take Zverev in this one? No, I'm not going to. I'm going to go with Medvedev in this one. I think Medvedev, at the end of the day, there was a mental block there. Zverev either against Medvedev or against Fritz, for whatever reason, can't beat these guys. So until he actually wins, I'm not going to pick them. I do think you're looking at a spot where Zverev and Medvedev might have a close battle. Maybe it goes 3. But once again, when you've won 9 out of the last 10 against his opponent, you've won 5 in a row. I'm not trusting Zverev, who beat Fokina. We know Fokina mentally can be a little bit fragile. And on top of that, he also had a deep run in Basel. So maybe fatigue played a factor. But we know Medvedev can also deal with these long rallies with Zverev. And I just think he's more decisive on big points. We know Zverev can be quite passive. Medvedev can be aggressive. And with the fact that Medvedev's been so good in the head-to-head, the price feels pretty cheap to me. I'll go with Medvedev here at around minus 110, minus 115. He owns him in the head-to-head. If Zverev wins, would I be shocked? No, because he's still a good player. Both players stylistically are pretty similar. But one of them owns the other. Good enough for me. Cheap price. I'll go for Medvedev in this one at around minus 110, minus 115. And let's wrap it up for the preview of the 4 matchups in the quarters. Time to go into the lock and dog picks. Before we get into the lock and dog, I'm honestly brought to you by our sponsor, Arnold Fantasy. Play with Pick'em. Entries for chance to win 5,000 times your entry. So once again, Arnold Fantasy Pick'em entries, chance to win 5,000 times your entry. Also, a new offer for customers. Play just $5. Get $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. They're off to a good start in college football, the NFL, and now they just added NBA. They're giving away weekly cash prizes just for tracking your bets in the apps. Track 5 bets of the same type model that we built, and you can win $1K. They have a promo code as well with us for a discount. Use code SGPN25. We download the Rhythm app for a quarter first month. Download the once again promo code SGPN25 for a quarter off your first month. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the preview of the quarters in Paris. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, going back to the last matchup, I will back the head-to-head history. There's Zverev to actually show up against his father. Give me Medvedev money line at minus 115. I understand Zverev has been playing good tennis lately. Then again, had a 3-set marathon against Karabelli. Not great. Medvedev, though, has won 5 in a row against Zverev, and he's won 9 of the last 10, 2 meetings this season as well. I like the form he's in. We saw him win a title a couple weeks ago, and Medvedev does seem like he's back to his old self again. So I think Medvedev should look pretty good in this matchup. Zverev, though, down a break in the third set against Ugo Carabelli. So despite looking sharp against, once again, Fokina in the second match he played, still not really sold on his actual form. With him struggling against Carabelli, he had a very deep run in Vienna with no time off in between. I'm a bit concerned that if this matchup ends up going serious distance, Medvedev's fitness will outlast Zverev's. We'll see. But the point is, Zverev hasn't been dominant in this matchup. Not going to overreact to one great showing against Fokina. Think there's still a little bit of, I'd say, head case syndrome there inside Zverev's head. Think Medvedev can extract it. Give me Medvedev to get the job done here. -115 as my lock for the show. For my dog, going back to the first matchup, give me Vacherot +1.5 games at +102. I think it's a good matchup here. At the end of the day, Vacherot's won 12 of the last 13, so he's been in great form. Only loss was a 3-set marathon against Fritz, so even the loss he had was very close against a top 5 player in the world, top 10 player in the world. Vacherot, though, has looked sharp so far in the event, only dropped 1 set in 3 rounds. He looks good. Felix, though, has been winning, but not comfortably. So he ended up retiring in the last match he played before the event after dropping a set in Basel to Munar. But he dropped a set to Altmaier, to Muller, and Comasagna. So he's dropped at least 1 set in 4 straight against pretty weak competition. Now Vacherot, who's in insane form, comes to town. Think he's in good enough form to win outright. But I do think Felix, if he ends up winning, I see it going 3. And I do think you're going to end up seeing what could be 1 set where Felix loses 6-3 or so, which puts Vacherot in a great spot. Vacherot might win outright, but I'll play it safe. Give me the games instead at +1.5 at +102 as my dog. So once again, the plays for the quarter, the lock's going to be on Medvedev money line at -115 against Zverev. For the dog, I'm going to go with Vacherot +1.5 games at +102 against Felix. We'll wrap up the show back once again for the semis, once again for Paris. So check that out.